Hi Tesla tribe. So this tutorial shows you how to make shimmy. Shimmy is an undergarment. It can be worn under Iro and Buba. It can be worn under transparent Bubu. If it's what you want to look forward to or watch, then stay tuned. So I have 2 yards of silk here. I have a bias, pack of pin, tape roll, armor curve, ruler, scissors, and a chalk. So let's get into it. The first thing I did was to measure what I needed. So my hip circumference plus a minimum of 8 inches, making 56 inches. So go ahead and measure your hip circumference, your round hip, and add at least 8 inches to it. Afterwards, I proceeded to fold into 2 neatly and into 4. Bear in mind that this fabric is very slippery, so you need to pin in place so it doesn't move or dance all around and give you funny shapes. So I took my time to pin. After pinning, the next thing you want to do is to go ahead and draw a borderline, just a straight line as a demarcation on top. I went ahead to measure half of my shoulder measurement for my client, which is 9. Half of it is 9. The total shoulder length is 18 from one shoulder point to the other. Afterward, I went ahead to measure the neck width of 4 inches and the neck depth of 6 inches. I went ahead to use my hammer curve to connect the neckline to give a perfect round shape. I also went ahead to take down 1 inch and draw a shoulder slant, as you can see. So I measured 9 inches wide lengthwise for my shoulder to create an armhole curve. Then I went ahead to use the curve to draw out my armhole. Go ahead and measure your bust, waist, and hip measurement. It's a shimmy, so it's most likely going to be straight from up to down. So the biggest part of your body, the biggest part of this client's body was the hip. So I used the hip measurements divided by 4 plus additional 2 inch. So let's say the hip measurement was 44, that is 11 plus additional 2 inch. It means I measured 13 inches at the bust line, at the waistline, and at the hip line. Then go ahead and cut out everything you sketched on the fabric, like I did, from the neckline to the shoulder slope to the armhole, then straight from the bust all the way to the hemline. I forgot to mention my shimmy length was about 40 or 45 inches. I'm not sure now, but yeah, it was below the nail length because it's for an older person. So afterwards, I went ahead to cut through. The reason my shoulder was really small was because Buba necklines are always very wide and you don't want your undergarment showing beneath it. You want it to be in place, not showing outside your Buba when it's worn, since it is supposed to be like an underwear. So that was why my shoulder was really tiny. Afterwards, I went ahead to join the shoulders on with half an inch sewing allowance, as you can see in the video. Sorry, the light went off at some point. That was why it wasn't bright. After I did that, I went ahead to join the sides. To join the sides, I went in by 1 inch on each side. So sew by 1 inch. After sewing all the way by 1 inch, as you can see in the video, you sew the right by 1 inch, you sew the left by 1 inch. Take your time. It's a really slippery material. It is silk, and so it is really slippery. If you are new to sewing, I would advise you first use a tail rule or an akara before you jump on this one. So take your time. Do not rush with slippery materials. They are very beautiful, but they can be very tasking. Ensure to cut off the thread on each after each sewing. And the reason I didn't make this so fast paced or cut it off was I really wanted you people to see the unfiltered part of this tutorial process. I wanted you to see how I made it. So I decided not to cut so much of the video clips. So I've decided to proceed to the other hand too. and do the same thing, sew on 1 inch. Sometimes mistakes happens when you're trying to sew, and that was why I was taking out the seam. I think at that point I had sewn, at some point I had slanted outwards, that is, maybe it was now less than 1 inch at some side of the sewing, and I needed to make it accurate, so I had to loosen the seam to make sure that it was 1 inch all the way down. Make sure you always lock your stitches at the beginning and at the end of each sewing. Afterwards, there's something I usually do because I do not have a weaving machine, and that is what I decided to do here. It's supposed to be my little secret, but well, I already let it out. I didn't see the need to cut it. So just to avoid my fabric from fraying, and because even when I try to outsource weaving, they don't do it, to my liking. So I decided to do this to avoid fraying and to avoid it looking funny. Imagine me giving somebody this outfit to make, and then instead of using the shade of thread to weave it, shade of thread of the fabric, they are using something like white or black. It's really not fair. And then I decided to do this, which also made it look neat, as you would see in few seconds from now. You see how neat it looked. So look at how neat it looks, really clean. Your sewing should look clean like this. Afterwards, I would be needing my bias here to tape the armhole and the neckline. Okay, before that, sorry, I went ahead, I proceeded to, hem the down part of the shimmy or the undergarment, like you can see in this video. So I went in by 1/2 inch twice, folding 1/2 inch, then folding 1/2 inch the second time. If you're not sure, I have a video where I already showed how to determine things like this. Use your tape rule, and if you need to pin anything in place, pin it down so it doesn't look funny. So go ahead and sew at your pace, as you can see me doing. At this point, I was done sewing the hem of the undergarment. So the next thing I needed to do was to take my bias and use it to conceal the edge of the neckline first. So I couldn't get the exact bias shade that matches the outfit, but I got something I could use. So I decided to use this army green. Now take a look and pay attention. I opened up my shoulder lines and placed my bias, the 0.25 aspect of the bias, placed it on the neckline, making sure that one is not outer than the other. They are both aligning. As you can see in the video, take your time and sew round, till you reach the other end, as you would see me do in this video. Make sure you try as much as possible not to sew beyond, the demarcated line on the bias, which is about 0.25 inches. So at this point, I was done. Take a look and look at this carefully. I had to fold it in, and I folded it in such a way that the outfit, the neckline of the fabric or the outfit was not out again. It had been concealed with by the folding of the bias. Fold it neatly. If it doesn't, you're unable to fold it neatly, you can pin it or press it down with an iron first, just to make it look really clean, because that is the neckline and it has to look as perfect as possible. So go ahead and follow through, round or square as your shape dictates till you reach the end. I've decided to show you the imperfections that comes with sewing. At this point, I think I had sewn out of the bias a bit. I wasn't sewing on the fabric and the bias again. I was sewing outside of the bias and I needed to correct that. So I had to take out the seams a bit to get that corrected. So after that, I proceeded to continue with the neckline. I decided to trim that up because I realized by the time I fold the bias on top, it will be showing outside of the bias, and I don't want that. The idea of using a bias is to conceal the fabric so it doesn't have any opportunity to fray. I proceeded to lock the stitch, trimmed off the thread, and then we get to move on to the armhole areas because we also need to conceal that place. Look at how clean it looks. So the next thing I needed to do was to iron, but there was no light at the time. So that was why I had to, signal that I needed to iron. Afterwards, every part you've sewn, every sewing part needs to be pressed properly, most preferably with a steaming iron. After that, we repeat the same thing. I had to go ahead and repeat the same thing on the armhole line. Conceal the armhole line with a bias, cover up the seams so it doesn't fray. Sorry, the edge of the armhole so it doesn't fray like we did for the neckline, and that's exactly what I'm doing, to pay rapt attention. So afterwards, I decided to cut off the fraying fabric. Imagine I just cut that fabric that same day, and then I had to, and while sewing, it was already fraying. So I needed to trim off the fraying thread so it doesn't become an obstruction while trying to conceal. Afterwards, I went ahead to conceal it, seal it up so it would not fray again forever. And that's exactly what I did, just like I did for the neckline. Pay attention, things like this will probably happen. That was a hand, I forgot. I don't think I filmed again. But yeah, this is what it looked like after I was done. And then this was it while folding. I couldn't press everything. This was it while folding and it looked really clean because it was a bulk holder. So I had to make different colors and it looked really beautiful. I decided to make this video because I couldn't find any of such clear detailed video on YouTube. So I hope you guys watch, you engage, you comment, and you share and like. And let me know what you want to see again aside this kind of video. But till next time, bye.